When I became a man, I put away childish things, including the fear of childishness and the desire to be very grown up. C.S. Lewis. For children, make-believe comes naturally. We are born with curiosity and wonder abounding, and only later does life slowly and methodically rip it out of us, one shred at a time. But for children, their heads lacking memories and knowledge to draw from, the simplest and most intuitive way to pass time is simply to make things up. As kids, we would make up stories for a variety of toys. Hot Wheels, Legos, and Army Men were our story-building tools. These sorts of children's toys don't often come with well-known characters attached, and then really never come with scripted stories. Parents all know well that their children don't need a story written for them. They're thrilled with the chance to make their own. When I was 10, my Lego castle set could change in an instant from being Helm's Deep to some Scottish castle that was the center of my own ongoing Braveheart fanfic. As much as I loved my indoor toys as a kid, what I was drawn to even more was the turf of my own backyard. Taking a Nerf gun or a stick out back with friends and pretending to be everything from Dunedain Rangers of the North to Marines storming Normandy Beach. My roughly whittled stick could be anything from a magical staff to a bow that fired imaginary arrows off an imaginary string. I might loosely follow the lore from something like A Galaxy Far, Far Away or some story I had seen on a History Channel documentary, but my mind was doing the majority of the work. The whole point of playing was to tell a story, to tell a better story than I had before, each time iterating on and expanding the universe I spent those grade school years carefully crafting. But all good things must come to an end, and eventually my early middle school years would see me trade my orange-tipped replica guns and handheld hot rods for schnazzy computer games that came in obscenely large cardboard boxes. The genre I inherited from my father through the big beige cube that sat on his desk running Windows 95 was real-time strategy. I enjoyed the alt history campaign in Command & Conquer Red Alert and later the epic tale of Jim Raynor in StarCraft, but what I really loved was a skirmish match against the game's AI. Every contest was like a fresh set of blank pages to write a new story on. Every unit on the screen was a character with an important motive, locked in a mortal struggle in the pixels of my monitor. RTS games gave me a whole new set of story-building tools, all malleable to my will and bursting with potential. StarCraft even allowed users to make their own custom maps with a tool that gave players access to something akin to a game engine to design whatever game they wanted, to tell whatever story they wanted. Incredible creativity and passion went into these proto-mods, if you will. They taught me that the ceiling to creativity and storytelling inside of games was utterly limitless. It was during these years that a trend began to develop and a gap began to form between the sorts of games I enjoyed and the sorts of games my peers enjoyed. The most popular games, by far, then as now, were those where the player controlled a single character who was on a harrowing journey in a world designed to be explored. That journey had a story pre-written by the game designers. It may have been linear, branching, or more recently even open world, but the game came with a story very deliberately and matter-of-factly written into it. By contrast, the games I was increasingly drawn to were those without stories. From city builders and tycoons to 4X games like Civilization and Total War, the games I really liked were what game critics now call sandbox because of their open-ended, play-as-you-please game design. What I didn't realize then was that I wasn't drawn to those types of games because they lacked a story. I was drawn to them because, like the games of my youth, I got to compose the story myself. They were petri dishes for my imagination. What I had run into then, but wouldn't realize until much later in life, is that it's impossible for a game to not have a story. Some just leave it to the players to create. These were the years that I played my first games of Magic the Gathering. I started by buying a small collection from a classmate of mine. I built my decks like I was king of some mythical land assembling his grand army. The theme of the deck was as important to the fun as the power and synergy. I hadn't discovered net decks, and my idea of a competitive player was someone who knew all the rules and had 100 cards memorized. All of this to say, when I started playing my first TCG, the world had not yet crushed my childhood curiosity and imagination. My brain wasn't using the cards to win or even compete, it was using them to tell a story. Years continued to pass, and my transition from teen to adult also saw the transition of PC game sales from physical to digital. I'll never forget going in to pick up my pre-ordered copy of Empire Total War on launch day at GameStop, only to be frustrated by a "This game requires Steam" notification during installation. This frustration would quickly do a 180 when I realized the potential of Steam to connect me with niche experiences, quirky strategy games and obtuse business simulators that would never be important enough for Target or Staples to carry, but which filled page after page in the Steam shop. This explosion in variety gave me dozens of new ways to tell stories. Through a litany of open-ended strategy-esque games on Steam, I got to explore my own personality. SimCity and City Skylines let me tell stories about balancing quality of life with a budget. Other city builders like Banished and Ostriv let me tell different stories about survival and perseverance. Paradox games let me see where my priorities would guide a country during the Dark Ages or World War II. I got to craft a 100-year narrative around quantity versus quality through dozens of spreadsheets in Gear City. Playing Mad Games Tycoon helped me discover my deeply rooted desire to create a story about myself being a world-class storyteller. Though I was never totally aware of what was going on under the hood, it was these offbeat games that helped keep make-believe alive in my soul for more than a decade of adulthood, where my hobbies, passions, and values all waned and waxed, before I eventually rediscovered the beauty of childlike wonder. Luckily, this new sense of wonder, complete with an obsession over art, beauty, and meaning, came several years before Sorcery was gifted to the TCG world. A childhood of spinning tales had all led up to this, my discovery of the greatest card game ever produced, and its monumental potential for player-driven storytelling. When I first discovered Sorcery in January of 2024, what I fell in love with was the art. Storytelling and make-believe were far from my mind. Even when I played the first few games with the beta precons, what I saw were the tactical possibilities of the 4x5 grid, not the incredible aptitude that the game had as a refuge for storytelling in a landscape where trading card games all have rich lore and strong IPs. It wasn't until I read something online pointing out that the avatars, sans the 4 alpha precon avatars, were designed intentionally with obscured faces, that I realized Sorcery provided me with a unique opportunity to make believe while playing a TCG. Anybody who sat through an 8th grade language arts class should remember the elements of a story: exposition, rising action, climax, falling action, and conclusion. Particularly adept students may also remember that a critical element of the exposition is the setting, the place and time where the story lives and breathes. Let us take our middle school wisdom and put ourselves in the shoes of aspiring game developer Eric's Curiosa some years ago. Let's say we wanted to fashion a brand new TCG from scratch with an emphasis on player-driven storytelling, which, by the way, Eric himself more or less confirmed that this suspicion of mine was true in the April 2025 Round the Realm video on the Sorcery TCG channel when he said that the story of Sorcery Contested Realm is up to the players. Nevertheless, let us imagine ourselves in Eric's shoes, eager to provide trading cards that aren't simply competitive puzzle pieces, but storytelling building blocks. If this was our goal, then our first consideration should be the exposition, specifically the setting. A story needs a place and time before it can exist at all. What better way to give the player agency over their story than to give them control over the setting itself? The genius of the 4x5 grid isn't just the chess-like tactics and flavor it allows for, it's that it adds another dimension of storytelling. It forces the players into a sort of collaborative dance where they get to create a different setting for every story, even as they're populating the story with characters and hardships, giving way to the rising action and eventually the climax. Every turn gives players a new chance to build out the setting to their own liking, but players are limited both by counterplay and the variance of their own deck. Not every setting is ideal, but suffering makes the hero. And so we arrive at one of the most innovative, purpose-built concepts I've ever seen in a trading card game. A 4x5 grid that provides not just complexity for the mind to sort through, but a setting which is itself created by make-believe. A story needs a hero to carry it through, and here again, Sorcery has set itself apart. A faceless avatar who has naught but a title at the top of their card can be anyone from anywhere. They become one of many building blocks available to players to use to build their own stories. By contrast, in nearly any other TCG, especially the current Big Five, you get cards with named characters who have personalities and backstories. Each new iteration of those characters creates risk. Our idols will always disappoint us, and fictional characters are no exception. In time, it's hard not to feel like a new iteration must be made, but there are going to be expectations on its power level and of its participation in the story that may prove tough to realize, especially because every player will have a slightly different version of that character in their mind's eye. The new card will always ruin some fans' headcanon. This way of designing characters in card games doesn't just neglect player-driven storytelling, it actively suppresses it. By contrast, a faceless avatar is, at every moment, exactly what the player imagines it to be. Just as in the video game market, where games featuring well-developed characters and pre-written stories are vastly more popular than sandbox games, with one or two notable exceptions, I'm under no illusion that the card-playing masses won't continue to prefer characters they know and love over ones that exist only in their own head. It's tough to come up with a new story every time you sit down at a table. But for those of us who have accepted the burden of imagination, those of us who love to make believe, a game like Sorcery is priceless for what it offers. Everything is a story. If you're not given one, then you're writing it. When the story is written for you, what's left for you is simply optimization of gameplay and mechanics. Even an open-world game is closed in some way to new ideas. It's already full of pre-scripted material that, no matter how adjustable, is only able to bend so far to accommodate raw creativity. When you take on the challenge of storytelling in the contested realm, you are accepting responsibility for your own fun. The floor is certainly lower for what stories you're going to get out of each game. The contested realm does not spoon-feed you characters with motives and compelling backgrounds. You're left to create them yourself in every game you play. The counterbalance to the lower floor is a limitless ceiling. Each game is an opportunity to build a new story or shape an older one. We all have an innate desire, a need to make believe. It's a shame that so many of us have had that need unfulfilled for so long, often for no better reason than that we don't want to be too childish. C.S. Lewis also said, "The process of growing up is to be valued for what we gain, not for what we lose." I'd like to invite you to regain whatever portion of yourself you've lost to time, and join me in the contested realm to tell a new story. I'd like us all to try and make believe again.